All right, let's get going. Hi, everyone, and welcome, and thank you for joining Kirkus Reviews and Ingram Library Services for the inaugural Cut the Line Reader's Advisory webinar. I'm Megan Labrise, Kirkus's editor-at-large and host of our Fully Booked podcast, which is about to celebrate its 400th episode later this month. I'm a past president of the National Book Critics Circle and a former public library page and college interlibrary loan clerk. We're excited to share this hour with you as we talk about read-alikes for Richard Osman's highly requested books, speak to three absolutely amazing mystery authors, and share in the love of whodunits, red herrings, riddles, and wordcraft. Before we begin, a few reminders. After the completion of this webinar, you will receive a download link for a certificate of participation to qualify for Reader's Advisory Professional Development. If you are experiencing any technical issues during the webinar, please send a note in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we will address it as best we can. We do encourage you to ask questions throughout the presentation. You'll be able to do so through that same Q&A box. We'll also be sending out polls and questions during the webinar, and we'd love to receive your responses. Now let's talk about why we're here. We Solve Murders by Richard Osman is the first book in a new mystery series from the #1 best-selling author of the Thursday Murder Club. Kirkus Reviews loved We Solve Murders. It received a starred review that reads in part, "The Thursday Murder Club takes a break while British TV personality and best-selling author Osman introduces another lovable group of unwitting investigators. The mystery isn't all that mysterious, but Osman fans will be glad to hop on that private jet and go along for the ride." We Solve Murders was published on September 17th in the United States by Pamela Dorman Books, which is an imprint of Viking. While it's only been out for 2 months, the book has been stacking up holds left and right. We took a look at some of the largest library systems in the country and found that there were more than 8,700 patrons waiting to read We Solve Murders in just 7 of those large library systems. Now, I'm going to turn things over to Beth Reinker to talk you through some of Ingram Library Services and Kirkus's recommendations of alternative titles your patrons will love to read while they wait their turn for We Solve Murders.
All right.
Beth Reinker is the manager of collection development curation for Ingram Library Services. She received her MSLS from Clarion University of Pennsylvania. And before joining the Ingram team, she worked in public libraries, including 10 years as a collection development librarian at Baltimore County Public Library in Maryland. She loves all facets of collection development work and is passionate about helping libraries build dynamic, inclusive collections for their communities. And now over to you, Beth. Thanks for being with us.
Great. Thank you. I got so excited about the books that I jumped the gun a little bit.
I see why.
It's a great list. So I'm really excited to be able to share this list of mystery titles with you today. There are so many fantastic mysteries right now that it was kind of hard to narrow down our selections, but I think we will all agree that we have just a fantastic book to kick things off. So I'm going to start with The Marlowe Murder Club. When 77-year-old Judith Potts witnesses a murder, the police rule it death by suicide, not believing her story. So Judith does what all amateur sleuths think is the obvious next step and decides to investigate it herself, along with her friends Susie and Bex in the newly formed Marlowe Murder Club. A second murder happens and appears to be tied to the first, but what could be the connection between the two murders? The club is on the case. The Marlowe Murder Club is the first in a popular series, and the 4th book in the series, Murder on the Marlowe Bell, is scheduled to release in July 2025. This series is right on trend as we see continued popularity of mysteries featuring quirky older characters, and this story is a natural fit for fans of the Thursday Murder Club series. And new readers are finding this series now because the TV series adapted from the novel is currently airing on PBS Masterpiece. A second season of the TV series is currently in production, so it's a safe bet that we will be seeing a lot more of Judith and the Marlowe Murder Club in the future. Author Deanna Rayburn is known for her historical Lady Jane Grey mysteries and her Veronica Spiegel mystery series. Those have been going on for years. But in 2022, she brought readers a fresh new series with Killers of a Certain Age. The Sphinxes are 4 female assassins who recently retired from the business and received an all-expense-paid trip from their employers. Sounds great, right? Well, it may not be the gift, it seems. On the trip, they spot a junior operative and realize he is on the job, and they are the marks. The Sphinxes are marked for death and must rely on each other to survive. As you can guess, it was a serious mistake to underestimate these women of a certain age, and the organization that they worked for will soon realize that fact. Readers absolutely loved this story, which received 4-star reviews and became an instant bestseller. Luckily, the Sphinxes are returning in Kills Well with Others, which publishes in March 2025. What happens when these women are called back from retirement? I know I can't wait to find out. The next 2 stories are a little more edgy than the average cozy, but like Richard Osman's writing, these stories have unique characters that may also appeal to his readers. In The Seminarian, Xavier Priestley, aka Priest, had a difficult childhood after he learned his father was a bank robber and then his mother left everything behind. Eventually, Priest went to seminary, but later lost his faith and became an investigator. The story begins when his best friend, stuntwoman/bodyguard Dusty Queen, asks him to take a job to find her girlfriend, Nikki Celeste. Priest can't say no. The case takes readers on a quirky thrill ride filled with unique characters that will appeal to readers of Tim Dorsey and Carl Hiaasen. The author created the TV series Bones, so it's no surprise that he wrote such a fast-paced, humorous story. In Neighborhood Watch, everything about Oleander Court, an upscale neighborhood in Alpharetta, Georgia, may seem perfect, but that's just what you can see on the surface. Underneath, secrets abound, and no one is truly innocent. After 2 neighbors are murdered, the residents must turn to, or maybe on, each other to survive. As the bodies pile up, it becomes clear to everyone that everyone has something to hide. A group of women from the neighborhood join forces to find the killer. But can they all be trusted? Told from multiple viewpoints, this story will be for readers who enjoy complicated characters and unreliable narrators. Sarah Langan, author of Good Neighbors, calls the story Agatha Christie meets Desperate Housewives, which I loved. Sarah Rada has previously written for middle grade readers, but this is her first adult novel. And the story has relatable characters, ulterior motives, and naturally murder. And it's told with an absolutely wicked sense of humor. The Wrong Hands is the second novel in Mark Billingham's Detective Miller series. Declan Miller is unconventional and criminally underestimated. In this story, he finds himself faced with a couple of unusual challenges. First, his wife's murder still hasn't been solved, and he's finding himself talking to her ghost way too much. Second, he finds himself in possession of a briefcase containing a pair of severed hands that were meant to serve as proof of a contract killing, but were inadvertently stolen by a pickpocket. Naturally, the contract killer wants the hands back to get paid for his work. This is a fast-paced caper that will capture readers' attention, and the humorous writing will entertain them along the way. For more Detective Miller, readers will also want to check out The Last Dance, which was the first story in the series. The Clutter Corpse is the first novel in Simon Brett's Decluttering Mysteries. Ellen Curtis's business, Spacewoman, is devoted to helping people declutter their space. Ellen's best friend, Hillary, who is a psychotherapist working with prisoners, asks Ellen to help with the home of Maureen, the mother of a young man who's being paroled years after killing his girlfriend. But, as you might have guessed, there's a problem. While cleaning the house, Ellen finds the body of a woman she used to know hidden in a back room. Naturally, Ellen begins digging into the victim's life and death. Brett is an award-winning mystery writer, and this is in the first in what is now a 4-book series, the most recent title of which was published in September. Meet Fran and Ken Stein. They're siblings, and they look and sound like humans, but they're a little unusual because they were grown in a lab by scientists. And one of the things that's unusual about them is that they both have USB ports in their bodies. In this series starter, Ukulele of Death, the siblings are private investigators whose client Evelyn asks them to find her birth father and points them to an unusual path to find him, tracking down a rare ukulele that he once owned. After Evelyn is killed, Fran and Ken decide to stay on the case to find her father, but the leads take them down an unexpected path with a connection to their own parents who died in an accident when they were young. The fast-paced, funny series with an unusual premise will be perfect for fans of madcap stories like Janet Ivanovich's Stephanie Plum series. For more Fran and Ken, be sure to check out the second book in the series, Same Difference, where the detectives team up to find a college student who's gone missing. And this is a story that Kirkus called A Hilarious Quest. In The Gardener's Plot, newly widowed Maggie Walker moves back to her hometown and signs up to help with the community garden. On the day the garden is set to open, Violet Bloom, the woman who organized the garden, is missing. But Maggie and the volunteers get to work anyway. That is until Maggie is digging in the garden and finds a boot that's attached to a body. When it seems that Violet and Maggie are the prime suspects, Maggie decides she should, well, dig into the murder. This is a debut novel that won the Minotaur Books and Mystery Writers of America First Crime Novel Competition. Like many other readers, I hope this will be the start of a new series. Next, we have What Time the Sexton's Spade Doth Rust. It's the latest entry in a beloved series, and in this one we find that adolescent detective Flavia DeLuce is working to prove that Mrs. Mullet, the family's longtime cook, is innocent of murder. Major Grayley, a neighbor and retired hangman, is found dead. Inspector Hewitt believes he was poisoned with mushrooms that Mrs. Mullet picked and served him. Flavia believes Mrs. Mullet is innocent, of course, and she begins investigating his death, but that leads her into a much darker plot that brings with it some shocking secrets. This story can be read as a standalone for readers new to the series, though, of course, I recommend reading it from the start. And this is a great time to bring new readers to the series because a film adaptation starring Martin Freeman as Haviland DeLuce is currently being filmed. There's no word yet on when we can expect the movie's release, but I think it will only add to the fan base for this series. And the slide highlights the first few titles in the series. This is a great time to ensure that you still have the full series in your collection. In The Mermaid Mystery, the town of Tidal Shores, South Carolina, never really recovered economically after 2020. So a group of residents, nicknamed the Big Ten, comes up with, I think, a somewhat unusual and surprising plan to revive tourism. A local taxidermist melds together the body of an albino bonobo with the tail of a Goliath fish, calling it a mermaid. Once the supposed mermaid, named Miss Lucy, washes up on shore, certainly tourists are going to come to see her. And what's even more surprising is that it actually works. Tourists who believe the mermaid has been found flock to the town. Zoe Porter is a journalist who comes to cover the story and expose the lie. When the taxidermist who created Miss Lucy is killed, Zoe works to catch the killer. With biting wit, Myers brings the reader along on a wild tale. Puzzle Me a Murder is the first novel in the Alice Pepper Lonely Hearts and Puzzle Club mystery series. Library director Alice Pepper had hoped to retire by age 65, but her divorce left her life in quite a mess. She's a great judge of people, and she has amazing puzzle-solving skills. In fact, she has a close group of friends who love to work jigsaw puzzles together over coffee or cocktails. And when Alice's friend Ruby is accused of murdering her cheating husband, George, Alice begins investigating the murder to exonerate Ruby. George was not a person who people liked for a lot of good reasons. And as Alice begins to investigate the murder, she finds a long list of suspects. But rest assured that she will put together the pieces to solve the crime. As you might imagine, the book's setting in a small town in the Pacific Northwest and its librarian sleuth who loves jigsaw puzzles will appeal to many mystery readers. The next book in the series, That Missing Piece is Killing Me, is scheduled to publish in July 2025. The cover image isn't available yet, but we do know that Alice is back, and this time she is investigating the disappearance of a local woman. Death by Dumpling is the first title in the popular Noodle Shop Mysteries. After a terrible breakup and quitting her job, Lana finds herself working in her family's restaurant until something better comes along. When Thomas, the property manager for the shopping plaza where the restaurant is located, is found dead, Lana is shocked to find that the murder weapon is dumplings from her family's restaurant. Thomas had a well-known shellfish allergy, and the dumplings contained shrimp, making the chef at the restaurant the obvious suspect. Lana decides to find the killer herself and uncovers many hidden secrets along the way. Set in Cleveland, this is a fun, fresh, cozy mystery, and readers who enjoy Lana are in luck. There are 10 titles currently available in the series. We've included the first few on the slide, and I also want to note that the 11th book in the series, The Chow Maniac, will publish in April 2025. In Final Cut, Joey Jessup works behind the scenes in Hollywood. As a costumer, Joey's job is to stay out of the spotlight and make sure that the stars look great. And she's happy to be working on a big superhero movie, even though it means working with her ex, Eli, and his new love interest, Courtney. Then, Joey finds Courtney dead on the first day of filming, and naturally, she's the prime suspect. The press picks up the story, and Joey is no longer behind the scenes. And as the murder investigation heats up, accidents halt production. Joey tries to find the truth. And this is a great read for fans of El Cosimano or Kelly Garrett. The second novel in the series, Starstruck, published in May. Arsenic and Adobo is the first in the Tita Rosie's Kitchen Mystery series. The story opens with Lila moving home to Shady Palms, Illinois, following a breakup. She begins working in her Tita Rosie's restaurant, and things take a turn when a restaurant critic, who also happens to be Lila's ex-boyfriend, Derek, winds up dead. Lila becomes the leading suspect. After Lila's arrest, with Tita Rosie's home and restaurant on the line for bail, Lila decides she has to find the murderer and clear her family's name. In addition to being a delightful mystery, the story is enriched by its dynamic cast of characters, many of whom are Lila's extended family, and it's absolutely filled with just mouth-watering food descriptions. In addition to receiving glowing reviews, Mia Manansala won the Agatha Award for the best first novel, and this book was on the Russo reading list. As you can see, there are now 5 books in the popular series, and the author will have her young adult debut in May 2025 with Death in the Cards. Finley Donovan is Killing It is the first in the witty and fast-paced Finley Donovan series. In this novel, Finley Donovan is a busy divorced mother and a novelist who's struggling with her current work in progress. I bet our authors can relate to this. Finley is surprised when she receives a note from Patricia Mickler, a woman who overheard Finley talking about her work in a local Panera. Patricia is now offering Finley $50,000 to kill her husband. Patricia says he's far worse than Finley's ex, and she's not wrong. Patricia's ex is not a good guy, which makes things even more complicated when Finley finds herself with Harris Mickler's dead body in her garage. Things go from bad to worse when she's asked to kill a second person. This is a breezy, fun story that will hit for readers of Jesse Sutanto's Vera Wong series. This was El Casimano's first novel for adults, and there are now 4 titles in the Finley Donovan series, with book 5, Finley Donovan Digs Her Own Grave, scheduled to publish in March 2025. Those Opulent Days is a debut historical murder mystery set in 1920s French colonial Vietnam. When 4 men who have been friends since childhood gather for an evening of indulgence, a fortune teller's prediction from 13 years ago that one of them will die by poison finally comes true. As the fortune teller predicted, the 4 of you, one will lose his mind, one will pay, one will agonize, and one will die. Any of the 3 survivors could be the killer. This title isn't quirky or humorous like many of the other titles on the list, but I think it's worth including because it has a great character-driven, semi-locked room murder mystery. This would be a great option for readers who enjoyed How to Solve Your Own Murder, which is also featuring a murder predicted by a fortune teller, though it has a lighter tone than those Opulent Days. The publisher is billing Knife Skills for Beginners as The Maid meets Knives Out with a dash of Top Chef. This is a debut locked room culinary mystery. When one of Chef Paul Delamere's oldest friends asks Paul to fill in as an instructor for a session at the Chester Square Cookery School in London, Paul agrees, albeit reluctantly. Paul is surprised to find that he's actually enjoying teaching the students, until someone is murdered with the cleaver that Paul used to teach a lesson on prepping squab. Paul will need to figure out who the killer is to clear his own name. The author, Orlando Murren, is a food writer, author of 7 cookbooks, host of BBC's Good Food podcast, and was a semi-finalist on MasterChef. The story will appeal to foodies who enjoy descriptions of food and recipes included. And the publisher is calling this elevated, cozy crime fiction for readers of Nita Prose, Anthony Horowitz, and Benjamin Stevenson. And speaking of Benjamin Stevenson, that brings us to the final title on our list. In this story, well-known crime writers are invited to the 50th annual Australian Mystery Writers Festival aboard a train from Darwin to Adelaide. One of the writers is Ernest Cunningham, who was invited to headline the event. When someone is murdered on the train, the remaining crime writers become detectives working to solve the crime. Naturally, all of them are knowledgeable about the subject, but that unfortunately also means that each of them knows how to get away with murder. Everyone on the train is a suspect is just as clever as Stevenson's wildly popular novel, Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone. It's a perfect homage to Murder on the Orient Express, and Stevenson's writing is like catnip for mystery fans. Both of the books in this series feature the same narrator, but this title works fine as a standalone for readers who are new to Stevenson's work. And that is all of the titles that I have to share with you today. I'm sure you are as excited as I am to hear from the author panel, so I'm going to throw it back to Megan to let us enjoy that discussion.
Thank you so much, Beth. That was absolutely wonderful. I could listen to you talk about books all day, seriously.
Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. Now it is my pleasure to be able to tell you a little bit about the magnificent authors you're going to be hearing from today on our panel, starting with John Shannon. John Shannon grew up in San Pedro, LA's gritty harbor, amidst the sons and daughters of longshoremen and fishermen. He went to Pomona College and UCLA, where he received an MFA in film. He has worked on a newspaper, as a technical writer and video producer, and taught school in Africa. He has lived in England for extended periods, and he spent much of the 1970s as a political activist in the anti-war movement. He published 4 novels before embarking on the Jack Liffey books, a series of mysteries set in the various ethnic communities, forgotten suburbs, and volatile subcultures of Los Angeles, slowly assembling a jigsaw puzzle portrait of America at the turn of the millennium. In his most recent novel, BOYSTOWN, legendary LA sleuth Jack Liffey is back and facing down a changing world when his brazen daughter Maeve enlists him to help find Benji, a gay social justice activist gone missing. As Kirkus said of Boystown, the deft juggling of multiple characters and plot lines, bolstered by a mastery of the sharp one-liner, makes Shannon's long-running series compulsively readable. Next, we have Tom Ryan. Tom Ryan is an award-winning author, screenwriter, and producer. His YA mystery, Keep This to Yourself, was the winner of the 2020 ITW Thriller Award for Best YA Thriller, and the 2020 Arthur Ellis Award for Best YA Crime Book, and the 2021 Ann Connor Brymer Award, and is currently being adapted for television. His follow-up, YA mystery, I Hope You're Listening, was the winner of the 2021 Lambda Literary Award for Best LGBTQ Mystery. He was a 2017 Lambda Literary Fellow in Young Adult Fiction. Tom, his husband, and their dog live in Nova Scotia. The Treasure Hunters Club is a rollicking murder mystery set in a seaside town filled with pirate lore, family secrets, unforgivable grudges, secret societies, and of course, a treasure lost to time. As Kirkus said of the Treasure Hunters Club, Ryan's masterful interweaving of multiple storylines, surprising plot twists, and often eccentric characters makes for a novel that is as enjoyable as it is suspenseful. And then we have Elise Bryant. Elise Bryant is the NAACP Image Award-nominated author of Happily Ever Afters, One True Loves, Reggie and Delilah's Year of Falling, and It's Elementary. For many years, Elise had the joy of working as a special education teacher, and now she spends her days reading, writing, and eating dessert. She lives with her husband and 2 daughters in Long Beach, California. It's Elementary is a quick-witted, escapist romp that perfectly captures just how far parents will go to give their kids the very best, all wrapped up in a mystery that will leave you guessing till the end. As Kirkus said of It's Elementary, Mavis Miller's first-person present narration evinces a razor-sharp wit, complementing the clever, twist-riddled plot. Myriad mysteries and an enchanting will they or won't they romance work in tandem to maintain tension throughout, while boldly drawn characters help spotlight issues such as racism, gentrification, and the devaluation of female labor. Welcome our panelists to this fine discussion. And I will say, to preface, what we're about to go through together, I have a list of questions and I'll address these questions to each of you in turn. But please, if you feel so moved as to respond to one of your fellow panelists, have at it. Give some sort of high sign and just go for it. I don't have ultimate control over what we say. But just to get us introduced, I was able in those brief biographies to give a little soupçon about the books we'll be talking about today, an amuse-bouche, if you will. I was wondering if you would give the appetizer portion of what is this book about. A little more than I was able to give, but falling short of a full meal. Capiche?
Got
Okay.
it.
All right. Elise, would you mind starting us off?
Yes, thank you. So It's Elementary right here is set in the wild world of the PTA. It follows Mavis Miller, who is so not a PTA mom, but she somehow still gets voluntold to join by the slightly terrifying PTA president, Trisha. When the school principal goes missing and Mavis sees Trisha dragging giant black trash bags and cleaning supplies out to her minivan in front of the school in the middle of the night, Mavis jumps to the worst conclusions. And so she is determined to get to the bottom of it. And so she launches a very amateur investigation with the very hot school psychologist as the Watson to her Sherlock.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Tom, would you go next?
Absolutely. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
I had a bit of a plot twist moment during the early part of the webinar. My AirPods died, and so I was scrambling through a drawer trying to find something. So that's why I look like I'm at a 1930s radio show.
I like it.
Thanks so much. This is really great to be here. The Treasure Hunters Club is my adult mystery debut, and it takes place in the charming seaside town of Maple Bay, Nova Scotia, which is best known as the purported location of a legendary buried pirate treasure, the treasure of notorious pirate Captain Barnabas Dagger. So for over 200 years, people have been flocking to Maple Bay every summer to comb the beaches and the fields and the forests around the town, looking for this missing treasure. And so against this backdrop, three strangers converge. We have a 15-year-old girl, Dandy. She's quirky and intelligent, and she's grieving the recent death of her very best friend, her grandfather, who she was basically joined at the hip with from a very early age. He taught her everything she knows about the sea, the legends of Maple Bay. She's very adrift, and she doesn't really know how she's going to go on without her buddy. And she finds that he left her a quest to find the treasure. He left her some clues and a letter, and he said, I want you to find the treasure that I spent my life looking for. We also have 30-year-old Cass Jones. She's a New Yorker, and she's licking her wounds after her splashy young adult six-figure debut novel turns out to be a historic flop.
Despite its start review from Kirkus.
100%. It has a starred review from Kirkus, and it didn't push it over the finish line. It's like one of those books that just didn't get where it needed to go. And she's trying to figure out where to go next. She's been dropped by her agent and her publisher, pretty harsh, and she's given the chance to house sit in Maple Bay, Nova Scotia. She's never been to Canada, but she jumps at the chance and decides to use this opportunity as a way of finding inspiration for her next book. And when she hears about the treasure, she decides maybe this is the story she's looking for. And finally, we have Peter Barnett. He's sort of a lost 40-something gay guy living in Vancouver. He lives with a roommate that he hates. He has a dead-end job. And out of nowhere, he gets a letter from a grandmother he didn't even know existed, who basically says to him, listen, I've been trying to track you down for years. I'm getting old. I have some family stuff I want to work through, and you're my only living descendant. Will you come back to Maple Bay, Nova Scotia, to your ancestral home and help me figure some stuff out before I die? So he takes this opportunity, and as all these three characters get together in Maple Bay, they get drawn into the story of the missing treasure, and people begin to turn up dead because it's a murder mystery. And the plot, as they say, thickens from there.
Thank you. Last but not least, John.
Okay.
There we go.
I'm now, yes. Hello, sorry. I'm not a techno whiz. I'm going to co-opt a little bit of this minute to talk about how I got started writing mysteries. So, what do you call it? It sounds pretentious to say a literary novelist, but I was a regular novelist. And I got kind of blacklisted for being politically involved. And it took me a while to get back. And what I thought about is that mysteries give you a chance to write about social issues and political issues. And it also gave me the opportunity to do the different ethnic communities of LA, because my guy is not, I wanted to break the mold of the two-fisted, heavy drinking Chandler type detective. It's just an ordinary laid off guy who finds out he can find missing children. And by finding missing children, you get to go to the Vietnamese community, the Korean community. You can go wherever you want in the city, and other subcultures too. And that really interested me. And in fact, the current one, BOYSTOWN, West Hollywood sort of calls itself BOYSTOWN from time to time. It used to be the heaviest gay community in the United States. And its entire city council and mayor are gay. And alternately, at the other end of town, there's a huge Ukrainian community, mostly Ukrainian Jews. Everybody there thinks of them as Russians, but they're not. I guess we're beginning to make a distinction now with this war so long. But anyway, I had initially decided on a conflict between those two communities, so what could be more obvious, a very conservative Jewish Ukrainian community and a very hip gay community at the other end of town. But I didn't want to make any of those people bad guys. So the tale starts that way, but then the way most of my writing has been, the people take over and it goes off in a different direction. And you've indicated the direction, so I won't repeat that. Oh God. That was a phone call from my agent. Uh,
Must be good news. You'll find
Yeah.
out later.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So,
Okay, that'll do. Yes.
all right, very quick question, just go around the room. On a scale from cozy to, suitcase full of severed hands, what are we looking at here, Elise?
Yeah, I'm still learning the conventions and what I think is cozy versus what other people do. There's it's much more towards the cozy side. There's no violence on the page, but I've learned that some people don't consider it cozy if you use like curse words, which my character does very easily. So that's the only thing that might take it either way. It's also very funny. I think the humor leads first in my book, which makes it go more towards the cozy side too.
Put a pin in humor. I hope we'll return to that later in the conversation. Tom?
I think I like to think it lands right smack dab in the middle. I mean, it has the trappings of a cozy. Clearly, it's a tiny little town called Maple Bay where there's a bookseller who's a charming bookseller and a little cafe and lots of interesting, quirky people. The librarian has an important role. And but as the story unfolds, I think it kind of goes to some really dark places that aren't necessarily completely on trend for cozy. So I kind of think I'm straddling the line, hopefully successfully.
John, do you agree with me? Not cozy.
No, I'm not cozy.
No.
I I will defer to the mysterious bookshop in Westwood, which used to publish a list of people, new writers, and they were all listed as categories, and they called me mid-boiled.
Mid-boiled.
Yeah, as opposed
Not
to
hard.
Yeah,
Not soft, but mid-boiled.
mid-boiled.
How'd you feel about that?
I think that's fair enough. Why not? I didn't want to be hard-boiled, although I appreciate hard-boiled. Okay.
What, to your mind, I'd like to ask each of you, makes your book a good and or an interesting comp for Richard Osman's We Solve Murders? Somebody who wants to read We Solve Murders, what might they find in your book? What qualities do you think would make it attractive to them? Tom, let's start with you.
I think the most obvious one for me, I mean, I love Richard Osman. I've read everything. I love his books. And what I think this book has in common, in particular with that, with We Solve Murders, is the fact that there are a few detectives of different demographic. There are people from different backgrounds and ages, all trying to solve the same mystery and joining forces unexpectedly to hopefully use their various skills and talents. And I think that would be the main connection.
Elise, I believe in the copy of It's Elementary that I received, there was a reading list, and I think Osman was on there.
Oh yes, the Thursday Murder Club series they're some of my favorite books of all time, and I love We Solve Murders too. I think bringing up the humor again. I think my books have a very light tone. I'm just like his do. I'm a little less subtle with my humor, but I just love how he can dive into these deeper issues, but do it in this way that kind of tricks you into it. You're laughing and then you're like, oh wow, that got really deep. And I think I try to do that too with my work. And then also like what Tom is saying, just the relationships of the people. I loved in We Solve Murders, that relationship between the daughter-in-law and the father-in-law. My book, Mavis lives in a multi-generational household. She lives with her dad. She has a 7-year-old daughter named Pearl. So you see a lot of that this interaction of the different generations. She also has a hilarious neighbor across the street named Miss Joyce, who gets involved a little bit in the investigation, even more so in the sequel that's coming out next year. So yeah, a lot of different threads, like Richard Osman's book.
Miss Joy is one of my favorite characters in your book. You already knew that. John, how about you?
Well, I have not read Osman, so I'm not competent, but from what others have said, I think people might appreciate the fact that all of my stories come out of character. In fact, they take over. There are sometimes when I have set out a series of plot points that I want, and the character won't do it, and the character goes off and does something else. And you have to let if your characters come alive in your unconscious, then okay, you go where you're going to go. And I had to rethink one of the books I was working on because it wasn't a lead character, but it was a secondary character, just would not do what I told him to do. Her.
One thing Elise mentioned about, intergenerational, family relationships. One thing I would tell people who are looking for the Osman book, but I was directed to your book, John, is, the relationship between Jack and his daughter Maeve in your book is a very cool, interesting one. And in the Osman, you've got, I believe it's a father-in-law, daughter-in-law relationship too, kind of at the heart of it in the new
Oh.
one. So it's that kind of intergenerational, cross-gender, familial relationship. It seems really ripe for exploration because you have a lot of commonalities and a lot of differences side by side, which is always neat to play out together.
Yeah, thank you for that, because I think the best character I've written is Maeve.
Yeah,
I love his daughter.
I agree.
She took off in a direction I did not expect her to become gay, but she did.
My parents didn't expect it either. So I've got a question from the Q&A that I thought I would slide in there. Osman aside, who are your favorite mystery authors? Elise, do you have another one or two you might name?
Yes. Well, I don't know if I talked about this in the other interview I did with you, but I grew up reading like my mom's Faye Kellerman and Sue Grafton books when I was like in elementary school and way too young to be reading those books. So that's like where my first love of mystery comes from. And then now I think one of my favorite series is the Highway 59 series by Attica Locke. Which we got the conclusion a couple months ago, and it was just so wonderful. So yes, I love her books, and then also I love the Finley Donovan series. I saw that was mentioned earlier. It was definitely one of the inspirations for my series.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, I'm outside of the great early Hammett and Chandler, and Ross McDonald. I love all of their books. I've read them, every one of them, and over actually. But I'd like to sneak in a hard-boiled novel that has had very little recognition, and it's weirdly overlooked. Richard Ford's The Ultimate Good Luck. It was only a second book, and it's not like the sort of middle American real estate salesman character that centered most of his Pulitzer Prize winning books later. But I just found it a stunning bit of technical expertise and hardcore writing. And it's very, very well written.
Mm-hmm. Call that a slow clap book. When you're reading through it, you're just like, oh yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Next page.
I circle things that I can steal myself.
Totally.
Yeah. Good writers copy or learn from, bad writers steal. I can't remember who said that.
How about you?
My favorite is Tana French. I love Tana French. I just from a sentence, just up there with the best literary novelists working today. But when it comes to this more sort of cozy genre, I really love Anthony Horowitz. His Hawthorne series is fantastic, and I really love the Moonflower and Magpie Murders books. And I think there's another one coming out. I'm not sure, but they're great. I'm just kind of in awe of how prolific he is. He writes TV shows, and he has these YA books, and he writes these amazing, well thought out mystery series. So he's really impressive. And I just also want to give a shout out to a book by it's coming out I think in December by a young queer Canadian writer, Daniel Aylman. It's called We Might Be in Trouble, I think. So good. At least you're nodding. Have you read it or have you heard of it? It's fantastic.
I have the ARC over here on my shelf, but yeah, I was a YA author. I still am a YA author, so I know Daniel, and he's wonderful. I'm excited for this new book.
For sure, and I think that's why I moved to it, because he was YA. I was YA, and I made this leap, and I thought I'm going to track that down. I got an ARC as well. And long story short, in a nutshell, the story is a young gay novelist, has a big literary success, and then finds his career kind of on the skids, and he ends up in bed with a guy and wakes up the next day and the guy is dead. And the only person he can turn to for help is his old school New York literary agent. Gosh, I'm forgetting her name right now, but she's one of the best characters, and the two of these characters have to deal with this dead body, and it's so good. It's not really a cozy mystery. It's more of a kind of a rompy, capery thriller, but highly, highly recommend. Coming out in December.
Fantastic. Okay, so comedy humor has come up a few times. Each of your books has its own sense of humor, which to me is like the one essential thing I need, just some sort of sense of humor. It could be bleak all the way to, you know, ribald, whatever. But I appreciate that so much in all of your work. I mean, you make California and Nova Scotia respectively seem like really fun places to die. Or be tied up or otherwise incapacitated, you know. So I wanted kind of to explore what makes comedy and tragedy such, you know, fabulous bedfellows, you know, and whether you see that as an essential component of the type of mysteries you write and want to write. Who wants to start?
I'll just say very briefly, humor is an essential part of sort of dealing with a world that doesn't work out the way you want it to. So you sort of make wry comments in your own head. And you're speaking to the reader, so you're giving them this little wry take on the world too, even though the world can get tragic as it has recently done. I won't go into that, of course.
It's another webinar.
Yeah.
I think it's about you know, sort of shadows and highlights and mysteries and thrillers, and you know, they're built around death, right? Like the engine of a murder mystery is murder. And speaking for myself, the types of books that I enjoy reading are the ones that I find fun and propulsive. And there are some thrillers that kind of fit the bill for me, grim, dark, shadowy thrillers that I find really appealing. But if you throw some humor, if you throw some characters in there who are actually managing to kind of remain light and sparkly and snappy with one another in the midst of the chaos, I think it just kind of it adds a nice balance to the storytelling that I think is really, really fun for readers.
Yeah, I agree with what both of you are saying. And I think it ties into how I see the world. I think some of the worst moments of my life, those days have ended with me laughing with my family or laughing with my husband, because it's just the way you get through. When you were reading the part of my Kirkus review before, you mentioned like my books deal with racism, gentrification, the devaluation of female labor, but I think I do it in a very accessible, funny way. I think it makes it easier to deal with those topics, to make them more accessible and approachable if we're laughing through it together. And yeah, I don't want to live in a dark world every day when I'm writing. I'm always sitting at my desk, like chasing the next laugh, the next giggle, because if I'm doing that, then I hope my readers do too. And it's part of the joy of writing, of creativity for me, is trying to make myself laugh and trying to make my readers laugh.
Which makes the book a joy to read, I will avow.
Thank you.
Okay, speaking of accessibility, I just want to point out to everybody else in the audience, a reminder, we have this Q&A box. The cool things about these kinds of panels is, you know, like these authors are coming together, maybe for the first time, probably for the first time, maybe for the last time. We don't know the future, but you know, this is, we're in the now. So ask whatever you want. If something comes to mind, please don't hesitate. I will read it out of that box. But for now, I have another question. And it is, at what point did you know the end of your mystery? At what point do you know the end? And now, John, you mentioned writing, sometimes the characters do some funny things you didn't really predict at the outset.
Yeah.
But at what point are you writing towards a point on the horizon, or like when? When does it appear?
Yeah, most of the books that I've written, I sort of had in my mind a disaster at the end. Sort of tie everything together somehow, a great earthquake or a riot or fire several times.
Poison gas?
Pardon?
Poison gas?
There's a fire in the current one, BOYSTOWN,
Yeah.
that traps it. It's actually based on I don't, no more self-promotion. Okay. Anyway, the characters don't always do what I want them to do, and that's great. I love them coming alive. But
Tom,
I
at what
usually,
point do you know?
I'm very much a plotter, not a pantser. So I kind of come up with the premise and take lots of walks with my dog to figure out who the characters are and what's the general thrust of the story. But I really love, it might be cliche, but I really love a big twist. I remember my first mystery reading experience ever was I was probably 12 and I read The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, and I can still remember very vividly the moment where I got to the big moment at the end, and it was like the rug was pulled out from under me and I was thrown off the couch at the same time. I was so surprised and so excited, and I think I've been chasing that dragon as a reader and as a writer ever since. So I try to put a big surprise in my books. That's just something I generally try to build towards. And in this one, I think I have a relatively big twist at the end, and I knew what that was early enough that I could then do a lot of reverse engineering as I was plotting. So it didn't happen by accident. I kind of needed to have that to write towards, and then a lot of the rest of it sort of fell into place more easily once I had that insight.
You're twisty. Yeah, I would say this is a twisty mystery, and say that 5 times fast. But no, I say no more, but I was shocked.
I'm glad to hear it.
yeah.
I'm
Elise?
excited to pick it up. I am way too anxious to sit down at my desk without a very detailed outline. Like, so much of my writing process is just tricking my anxiety that it's going to be okay and I'm going to reach the end. And actually this book, It's Elementary, it came really like all at once. It was a Labor Day weekend in 2022, and I had a call with my agent on Friday, just like talking about what I was going to do next. And she had always been like, "You're going to write a novel for adults." And I was like, "Never. I'm barely an adult. How can I write a novel for an adult?" I mean, I'm in my 30s, but I still don't feel like it sometimes. Like, I deserve to be here. But so I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. And then the next morning, I was at breakfast with my husband, and I was like, I'm not going to do this, but what about PTA moms? What if I wrote a book about them? And we sat over breakfast and plotted out the entire novel, every twist, the end, all of the suspects, the red herrings, and it just like came out. And I just kept sending my agent like more and more like slightly unhinged emails. And so by the time she came back into the office on Tuesday, she had everything, like the whole plot from there. And that's the only time that's ever happened to me for a novel. But I will gladly take that again because it was very fun.
We've got a question in the chat then from Amy Blake. Do you ever change directions from your original plans? Therefore, Elise, no, you don't?
Yeah, I do. I do
you-
change. I'm still flexible.
Okay.
I will do it kicking and screaming because I want to stay on my plan. But then, like John was saying before, the characters kind of show you where you need to go, and when you've made a wrong turn. So yes, I change, but I need to have it all figured out so that I don't have a panic attack about, can I ever finish a novel again?
Tom, you change plans?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I always like to leave enough space around the edges that I can kind of play around. And I think that if you're so rigidly attached to a structural plan, then that comes across in the writing. So you want to allow things to kind of happen organically. But 100%, I agree with both of these guys. It's the characters are the ones who kind of end up screwing you over. You have a plan, you sit down at your desk, and character X is going to do this today, and I'm going to get my 2,000 words out. And then they say, no, I'm going to do this instead. And it takes you in a different direction. Ultimately, I think if I know my resolution is still kind of possible, I might just have to take a different route to get there.
Tom, you've actually got a comment in the Q&A. You definitely got the twist in the Treasure Hunters. I didn't see it coming, says Renee. I'm with you, Renee. Totally.
I'm excited to
Love
read
it.
this
Love it,
one.
Renee. Thank you.
Get psyched.
Yeah.
And John, you've confessed that sometimes these characters take you on a magic carpet ride.
Yeah. Against your will, because you have something plotted out. Hey, no.
We have another question from chat, and it's, what are you working on now? Will we see the same characters again? How much life is left in Jack, John?
He's got one other book written, and it's about a plague a COVID-like plague. And I wrote it some time ago, actually 10 years ago.
Tom, don't tell me a sad story like that.
Yeah, well, I'm not the
Well, I
only
don't know if I got nothing that good. No, I have nothing that good in my own personal history. I'm writing a sequel. I am about to write a sequel to Treasure Hunters, but I have another book that will be announced for next fall soon. And I don't think I'm supposed to talk about it, but I will say this much. If nobody, I'm just going to say it's teenage detectives grow up into middle age, and we meet up with them 25 years after the case that derailed their youths. So we're pitching it as Nancy Drew meets Silence of the Lambs with a bit of Yellow Jackets thrown in.
Perfect.
That sounds good.
With a twist.
Yeah. So I'm working on my next YA rom-com right now, but the sequel to It's Elementary does come out next July. It's called The Game is Afoot, and it continues to explore those dark sides of motherhood. So in this case, it's extracurricular activities, especially soccer, kids soccer, and MLM girl bosses and gentle parents.
Okay, I unfortunately see that we're sliding right up against the timeline, and I will soon have to give my little ditty and we're going to sign right off. But there's one question in the chat. We don't even got time to answer this, but I'm going to read it because I love it. This is from Ben. This may be a bad question, he begins, which has already piqued my interest. But it is something I've noticed whenever I would read mysteries with my book club. So maybe it's a trope or it's just coincidental, but does it seem like the culprit is always either really, really nice or they are underdeveloped until they have to become the culprit? I tend to figure out the culprit really fast because of that. How challenging is it to balance your culprits' backstories and their personalities, but while maintaining the mystery and having the reveal hit? If you can answer that question in 7 words or less, you're welcome to do so. But instead, we could just leave it hanging out there in the air to haunt you.
Let it haunt.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you very much, Ben. And thank you, John. Thank you, Elise. And thank you so much, Tom. That was a really fun and illuminating conversation.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone, for attending our inaugural Cut the Line Readers Advisory webinar. You can download a certificate of completion by scanning the QR code currently on screen or by clicking the link to download in the post-attendee email tomorrow. You'll be prompted to enter a password that is RAW, all caps, to start the download.
Okay.
This may have been our first webinar, but it will not be our last. Scan the code on the screen now to register for our next Cut the Line Readers Advisory webinar on February 6th, 2025 at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. We'll announce the next topic in the new year. Thanks again. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.